But he said the month, ash-shahru hakadha. And he put out his fingers, 29. And that is one of his miracles, because we know that it's never a full 30 days. It's always 29 point something. It never completes 30 days. But it will show up on the 29th or the 30th. So he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that if you, he said, sumu li ru'yatihi wa aftiru li ru'yatihi. Fast according to its sighting. The hadith has many narrators. Fast according to its sighting. It's a mutawatir hadith. So fast according to its sighting. Break the fast according to its sighting. وَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ أَوْ غُبِّ عَلَيْكُمْ meaning خَفِي عَلَيْكُمْ. And if it's obscured for whatever reasons, he didn't say clouds, or it just, if it's obscured, because, and this is another miracle of the Prophet ﷺ, because it's there, but you can't see it, because the light of the sun is too intense. And so what happens is when it's on the horizon, the elongation is going to be the angular separation from, right, in this ecliptic, it lines up with the sun. It's going to, depending. If it's perfect lineup, you get an eclipse of the sun at the new moon. Or it's going to be this way or that way. Okay? So at that point that it separates, this is called the mufaraqa. Alright? The separation. So you get the elongation, which is the angle. The angular elongation is the distance. The angular distance between the sun and this new moon. And you need, in perfect conditions, 9 degrees for it to be visible. Each degree is 4 minutes, right? So you need, on average though, it's going to be more than that. And so here's what he says, alright? So, by definition, this is too close to the sun for viewing, alright? Within 1 or 2 days. You see? You cannot predict this thing. And that's why this modern thing of predicting it, I'm giving the view of classical scholars. So this is not, Hamza Yusuf's view of, calendrical calculation of the moon. You can calculate new moons. They've been able to do that for centuries. I mean, obviously you can do it now with much greater calibration, like it's down to nanoseconds. But they've always been able to determine when, Stonehenge, they were doing this. They could determine when the moon was lining up with the sun. And that's why they could predict eclipses 2,000 years ago. So it's not new knowledge. So what he's saying is the first crescent moon appears in the western sky just after the sunset, providing a striking visual event. All right. And for some sky watchers and amateur astronomers, much effort and time is spent attempting to sight the first crescent moon at the earliest possible time after the new moon. This task is not as easy as it seems. Now here's a guy this is apparently all he does, is monitor the moon. All right, I'm not being fair to him because he's done a great service. And this is the only book that I've found of this type where it really goes into a lot of detail. So the task is not as easy as it seems, as visibility of the slender illuminated crescent is affected by a number of variable factors. So there's all these variables, which are called X and Y's, right? These are the unknowns. Including local humidity, and this is something Ibn Taymiyyah mentions in Radd ala al-Mantiqiyyin. He says you can't predict he argues against calculation because he said there are too many variables. The climate, the atmospheric, content of humidity, whether you're in a northern or a southerly hemisphere. There's all of these variables. And so he says, including local humidity, which produces haze in the atmosphere. Now we've got pollution. Weather conditions, the time of year, the geographical location of the viewer, and the time of day when the new moon occurs, but also where the new moon is in relation to this elliptical orbit. Because sometimes the moon is going to be closer and sometimes further away from the earth. And this is going to affect the visibility also. So you've got all of these factors coming together to make this day, which the Prophet ﷺ called the day of doubt. And the day of doubt is that the 30th day. He called it Yom Ashak. All right, Yom Ashak, the day of doubt. And he said, Man sama Yom Ashak faqad asa Abul Qasim. Whoever fasts on this day of doubt, out of caution that maybe it's Ramadan, because it could have been Ramadan. Like if there were clouds and it could have been a visible crescent. Maybe they saw it somewhere else. And in those days they didn't have cell phones or radio or television. So he said, still, if you fast that day, you have disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ. Because it is a day of doubt. Now, the modern people are saying, oh, we've eliminated this day. You see, this is what the modern calculating engineer Muslims are saying. We've eliminated this day. We're all certain now when it's born. Well, according to NASA and people that actually know something about this, all of them admit you can't predict it in the first 24 hours. So why are they doing that? I don't know. Because they want convenience store Islam, as far as I'm concerned. They want to be able to block it in on that day. Cesarean moon births. It's like cesarean births. Doctors love cesarean births because they can schedule their golf in and they can do all their things that, but when they're on call, when they don't know when the baby's coming, right, it doesn't make life easy for them. So the same way with modern Muslims, because they're in this new culture. And they're arguing, oh, well, Islam is about making things easy for people. It's too hard. We need to have national holidays. We want the Eid to be a holiday, so let's make it on. Predict it. We can predict it until the Day of Judgment. We'll just do the Eid. We'll schedule an Eid for the next 100 years. So the current record for the earliest crescent moon spotted with the naked eye is 15 hours and 30 minutes. That means from the angular separation, that means when the sun and the moon lined up in the ecliptic, then the moon separates from the sun, okay? So it's separating, right? Now, because of that angular separation, you're going to see this sliver, right? And that it's going to increase every day as the separation increases by 13 degrees every day, about 52 minutes. 52 minutes. So every day the moon is going to be higher, right? And then it goes down, right? And then it starts rising. Now, that, according to, a heliocentric, that most of that movement, because the moon moves very slowly. So most of that movement is actually Earth spin, according to the heliocentric. All right. So then he says, using binoculars, the first crescent moon has been seen at 13 hours and 32 minutes. So after the angular separation, 13 hours and 32 minutes. With a telescope, the earliest sighting is only 12 hours, 7 minutes after the new moon. Ordinarily, the first crescent moon will be easily visible within 3 calendar days of the new moon. So it's within 3, and that's why, subhanallah, in Arabic, bil-Arabiyya, al-hilalu li thalathati ayyam. The crescent is for 3 days. After that, it goes back to being called a qamar. But for 3 days, it's called a crescent. Because you might not see it the first second, you'll see it the third day. But because 30 days have passed, you're gonna, and this is why it's a self-correcting system. This is why, if you use calculation, this is what they don't realize, but it happens. Because Saudi Arabia, 2 years ago, had the first of Muharram twice in a row. They literally had to, and nobody said anything, because, it's just so interesting how they live in this kind of world of, we're going to pretend like nothing's happening. But everybody got up, they got their morning paper, they're drinking their qahwa, right, having their ful mudammas or their tamar or whatever. And it's first of Muharram on the newspaper. And they're kind of thinking like they're in the twilight zone. Wasn't yesterday, and literally the twilight zone, because it's from the twilight that they didn't see the moon. And so, because they calculate the moon, they lose a day. So eventually they have to correct it. Whereas if you follow this natural cycle, it will always be self-correcting. You'll never get 2 days off. Whereas if you calculate it, you can actually get 2 days off. And then you're stuck with having to admit, oh, but they don't admit. They just pretend like nothing happened. And then he says, for earthbound viewers before, however, the quest to sight a first crescent moon has existed long before spaceflight, rockets, or even telescopes. Many ancient calendars, in fact, were based on the movements of the moon, and human observation was required to keep track of the beginning of lunar months. In the modern world, a few calendars are still based on lunar rhythms. Fundamentalist Muslims, for example, follow the traditional, so I guess that puts me in that category there, follow the traditional Islamic calendar and must sight the first crescent moon in order to mark the beginning of calendar months. This sighting must be done without the aid of magnification, and 2 reliable witnesses to each sighting are required. That's in a village, but now you need, like in the Hanafi madhab, and I think this is the only valid position now in a globalized environment, especially when you have a lot of unscrupulous people that will just say it because Saudi Arabia announced it, and so they're going to say it, thinking they're doing a good deed or something, I don't know. But I wouldn't trust a sighting of a few people, especially with the modern technology. Like this year we had the problem because they saw the moon in Argentina, but when we called up, only 2 people saw it. The other people in Santiago and other places didn't see it. It was only 2 people from a Shia mosque, and the Shia in North America accepted it. All right, based on their criterion. And then because of the initial news reports, some of the Muslims here accepted it, and it caused a problem in the community. But you have to have a jam' al-ghafir, which means you have to have jama' mustafida, enough people that it's impossible they could have conspired to do it. So that means a lot of people seeing it in some place. Whether, we'll get into that with the Caesarean moonburst about, whether or not you need local or global sighting. These are 2 valid positions. Both of them are absolutely valid fiqhi positions. I don't have a problem with either of them. I prefer local, but local is increasingly becoming problematic. Then he says, of prime importance is the determination of the start of the holy month of Ramadan on page 74, a time of fasting and devotion. But Muslim communities have a habit of starting their celebrations on different days in any one year due to their varying locations and sky conditions for sighting the crescent moon. Places lying westward of where the crescent moon can first be seen from the earth have a better chance of seeing it. So that would make the very best chance on this planet to see the new moon would be where? It'd be like here, Hawaii. It's the most western places. That's why if Saudi Arabia says they saw the moon, and then nobody here sees the moon, it is impossible because the moon is 12 hours older than when they saw it there. And if we know that it 15 hours is the minimum that they could have seen it. So by the time it gets here, we're talking, right, about 27 hours later.